Morning everyone. Today is Monday, April 6th, and I'm going to be going through a couple topics in the algebra unit. So hopefully you have downloaded the algebra workbook notes. This first and second page, these are going to be for homework. You're going to be looking at these definitions using the math dictionary. And I'm going to start on this page right here. I'm going to go through algebra vocabulary, and we're going to go all the way to the end of page 5, which is collecting like terms. On Wednesday, I will start with exponent laws. All right. So you can just listen if you like, or you can follow along and fill in the blanks on your sheet if you printed them off. So the first part, expressions in algebra are called, I'll just move, polynomials, and a polynomial is made up of several terms. You can tell them apart because they're separated by operations. They're either added or subtracted, and the sign in front of the term belongs to that term. State the terms in each polynomial. So there's a polynomial here. This one is made up of two terms, so it's called a binomial. The first term is 2x, and the second term is positive 3y. Question number 2. This one has three terms. Positive 5a is one term. Negative 4c squared is the second term. And positive 8 is the third term. Okay, so every term has a sign in the front. For the third question, we have a this was a trinomial up here. This one has four terms. The first term is positive 6x squared y. Second term is negative 7x. Third term is negative 9xy. And the fourth term is positive 4. Up here I added a plus 8. That doesn't really need to be there. We know that if there is no sign, then it's automatically positive. I'll just take that out. Next slide. All right, parts of a term. So if we have the term negative 5x squared, each of these parts has a different name. The negative 5 is called the coefficient, and the x squared is called the variable part. The coefficient is always written in front of the variable. Okay, so we always have the number part first and then the letter part. Terms are identified by their variables. Okay, so we're interested in the letter part, okay, to distinguish between them. Terms without a variable is called a constant. So in this example here, it says identify the m term. So you're looking at, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different terms. We're looking for the one that has an m and no other letter with it. Okay, and that would be this one here. So it says identify the m term. So this is the whole term, positive 6m. Identify the coefficient of the xy squared term. So you're looking for the xy term, xy squared term, which is right here. It's asking for the coefficient. The coefficient is just the number part. The number in front is negative 3. Identify the coefficient of the a term. So you look through, you find the one that has the a term. That's this one right here. And we want the coefficient, so the number in front of the a is a 1. If there's no number in the front, it would be a 1. All right, just like if we look at the second term here, the coefficient in front of the d to the exponent of 4 would be negative 1. So if I asked you for the coefficient of the second term, it would be negative 1. Identify the constant term. That's a term that doesn't have any letters with it. And the only one of those is the one at the end, which would be negative 7. Okay, so the whole term is negative 7. Meaning of terms, vocabulary. Within a term, multiplication is understood. Okay, so what that means is the sign between the 3 and the x would be multiplication. So this means 3 multiplied by x. Okay, or 3 times x. This x squared means x times x. 5m squared means 5 multiplied by m multiplied by m. 5m in a bracket squared means you're going to take the 5m and multiply it by itself twice. Okay, so 5m multiplied by 5m. But 5m is 5 times m, so we have to write it twice. Excuse me. AB squared means we're multiplying a times b times b. A squared b would be a times b. These two here look similar, okay, but they actually are not the same. The first example here, negative x squared, means we have one negative sign and then we are squaring the x. Okay, we're not squaring negative x because there's no bracket. It's just one negative sign and then x times x. This one here has a bracket, so it means negative x multiplied by negative x, right? You're squaring the entire thing in the bracket. Convention for writing terms. In a term, if more than one letter appears, they should be written in alphabetical order. Okay, so for xbm, you need to switch these letters around so they're in alphabetical order. So it would be 4bmx. Negative 3 yx squared, right? Put them in alphabetical order. You're going to put your x squared first and then the y. Polynomials involving the same letter are always written with decreasing exponents. All right, so if you've got this example here only has x's, you want to have this term first, the 5x squared, because it has the largest exponents. The next one would be 4x, and then the constant at the end. Okay, when you move them around, make sure that you move each term with the sign that is in front of it. 5x squared has a positive in the front, right? So I'm going to start with positive 5x squared. Next term is positive 4x, so plus 4x, and then at the end subtract 5 because that has a negative in front. Okay, for the next one, we've got the cube, negative 14x cubed first, so I'm going to say negative, right? The sign moves with the actual term. So negative 14x cubed is first, then negative 3x squared second, and then at the end we have plus 6, okay, because the 6 is positive. Collecting like terms. So this is the second lesson, okay? Sorry. All right, so we're going to do polynomial first and the special name, and it depends on how many terms are in each polynomial. Okay, so the first polynomial, you can see that we have two terms, 4xm minus 8. That's called a binomial. The second example has 3 terms. That's called a trinomial. Right? They're separated by pluses and minuses. The third example has also 3 terms, and the last example has 1 term, so that's called a monomial. Second question is asking you to write the x term. So you're looking in each example and just finding the x term. The first example here doesn't have an x term. This term is an xm term, right? It's called an xm. So this one has no x terms. The second one, this one has an x term. Okay, so it would be positive 1x. There's a 1 in the front, or we assume there's a 1. Third example, the x term would be a negative 1x, because it's a minus in the front. And then the last one does not have an x term. The constant term, that's a term that doesn't have any letters with it. So in this example here, we have a negative 8, as a constant term. Second example doesn't have any. Third example doesn't have, oh, third example does have one. It has a negative 12. And the last example does not have one. What is the coefficient of the m squared term? No m squared terms here. I don't know why I have a 1 there. That's not right. Let's get rid of that. Oops, there we go. Second example, oh, we should say, I'll add the word none in a second. The second example here, the coefficient of the m squared term is 1. This one does not have an m squared term. And the last one, the coefficient is negative 13. I'm just going to add the word none in this spot here. All right. There we go. Collecting like terms. To identify like terms, they must have the same variables with the same exponents on those variables. All right, so what we're doing here is we're going to group them based on their endings. All right, so you can see that the first term has an xy as its ending, and this term here has an xy. So we can add those together. We can group them together. And then these ones, the positive 13y and the negative 14y can be grouped together, right? Because they both have a y as an ending. So what I did in the first step is I wrote them next to each other according to how they matched. Okay, so these two match together, so I wrote them first, and then the 13y, negative 14y, they match, they go together, so they're next. And now we're just going to add, so 6 plus 7 is 13. You don't do anything to the endings, right? The endings don't change, you're just adding the constants in the front, or the coefficients. And then 13 subtract 14 is negative 1, so we have negative 1y. Okay, one more example of that type. Okay, same thing, so group together the ones that that go together. I think I used red first. Okay, so I've got 4a squared, and I've got positive 13a squared, and I've got positive 6a squared. So those are going to go together. And for my third 3ab, that's positive. And this one can actually match with this one at the end, okay? Because we're going to assume that AB is the same thing as BA, okay? Those are equal to each other. Okay, so they can go together. And then we've got a negative 4b and a negative 13b. Okay, I like to circle them first. Okay, now I can write them next to each other with the correct signs. All right, so I wrote 13a squared first, but I could have written 4a squared. It doesn't really matter what order you write them in. Just make sure that they have the right signs that go with each of them. They're all positive for the first three. And then I've got my, oh, my colors don't match here, I just realized. Oops. That's okay. So 3AB should be in green, and then BA, and then I've got my last two terms at the end there. Okay, and then in my last line, I combine on those. 13 plus 6 plus 4 is 23. 3 plus 1 is 4, and negative 4 subtract 13 is negative 17b. Notice I'm not changing the endings, right? The letter parts, I'm just adding the numbers in the front. Collecting like terms. Continuing, second example. For this one here, we want to know, is the following equation true or false? And then prove it. So do you think that 3x plus 4y is equal to 7xy? Do you think this is true? That's what we want to check. Okay, so what I've done is I've just randomly said, why don't we let x equal 2 and y equal 1, and then see if the right side is equal to the left side. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I have left-hand side of the equal sign when I say left side, okay? Right side, I mean the right side of the equal sign. So for the left side, we have 3x plus y on the left-hand side, and I'm going to replace my x with 2 and my y with 1. All right, I'm writing it in brackets. So 3 times 2 is 6. 4 plus 1 is 4, which gives me 10. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the right-hand side. So on the right-hand side, I have 7xy. And I'm going to replace the x with 2 and the y with 1. Okay, so I'm going to end up with 7 times 2 times 1, which is 14. And notice the right side does not equal to the left side. Okay, so for that reason, we can say that the equation is not true. Okay, you cannot say 3x plus 4y is equal to 7xy. That is not true. And the last page, last example. Okay, this is very similar to the example that we did over here, right? We're grouping the terms, except here we have brackets. And the brackets actually don't do anything in this case, all right? Because we don't have a number directly in front of the bracket. You will see other examples this week that I will show you that have numbers in the front, and something will happen with the brackets. But if there's no number in the front, we can simply just remove the brackets, okay, like I did here. And now you can collect like terms, so add together the terms that are like. So we have 3x and 13x. They will go together, and the 4y and 14y will go together. 3x plus 13x is 16x, and 4y plus 14y is 18y. And the last example over here, just remove the brackets first and group together the ones that have the same ending. So 7a and 6a, 3z, and then minus 4z. Okay, and that's it for the instruction for this lesson. So for homework, I'd like you to do the definitions on pages 1 and 2 of the algebra notes that I showed you at the start. Those are the ones right here. So if you could get those done, please. And then there's some questions in your workbook that you've got. Okay, 2 and 3 on page 57, number 6 on page 60, and number 1 on page 62. If you could take photos of your homework and submit that via Google Classroom in the same post here before Wednesday's lesson, that would be great. Send me an email if you have any questions. We are going to try to set up some online office hours. At this point, just whenever you have a question, just send me an email. I think that's everything. All right, good luck, guys.